Too many things at once. Okay, can everyone hear me? Do I need to turn it up a little bit? We good? Turn it up a little? Good. I'm trying to accommodate the folks that might be at home watching or people that might want to watch this later. So I'm taking extra precautions to make sure everything's going the way that it should. So just be patient, okay?
Patience is a virtue.
I know the pizza's waiting, so one more thing I want to... Stop. You're good. I just need to switch this. There. All right. So quiet in here after all the singing and shouting and praising and praying going on. It's like, so what do we do with this? Let's pray. God, once again, we're just so thankful for this building in which we gather, Lord, for the resources that you have blessed us with. Thankful, Lord, for each saint that is gathered here, both in our sanctuary and those that are watching virtually or might watch later in the week. We pray, Lord, that as we gather together for this informational meeting, we would learn not just more about the Global Methodist Church, but also, Lord, begin to discern your will for us here at Mill Creek. God, we know that you have guided us and led us in the past. You have been just so good to us, beginning with that time that we came together and with the merger, and you saw us through so many things, but we know that you have good things in store for us. So we just pray for your leading to be with us, for your guidance, for your wisdom, and most of all for your Spirit. And just pray and ask each one of these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. So, our reason for being here is to learn a bit more about the Global Methodist Church. You know, we've had some discussions in the past, and this will be a good time for us to just refresh our memory on some things. So you'll see there on the first page of your handout that what we're going to try to accomplish here in a short period of time. And I realize it may not be easy for us, but we're going to do our best to try to get out of here in about a half an hour or so at the most. But this is an important decision, a weighty decision, so we don't want to rush through it. And we'll stay here as long as necessary to get your questions answered. I want to make certain that we have the information that we need and all of our questions are answered regarding this opportunity that we have. So we're going to watch here a video from Reverend Dr. Jeff Greenway. And Dr. Greenway is a pastor of a church in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, down by Columbus. They were a former United Methodist Church. They have since disaffiliated, and he has shifted his credentials now to the new Global Methodist Church. Him and a man named Mike Lowry, another pastor, have written this book about recovering Methodism. And the short video we're going to watch is he's going to explain 10 reasons why we should join the Global Methodist Church. So Bill, if you would flip to the next screen, that gives you a little idea about his credentials. He graduated from Mount Union right there in Alliance. He has an MDiv, a Master in Divinity, from Asbury Theological and Wesley Seminaries. So those two things right there tell you that he's a grounded, theologically conservative, Orthodox, trained pastor. He was a former president of Asbury, and he was a DS in the Western Pennsylvania Conference of the United Methodist Church. So if you go to the next screen, and then click, let me turn the sound system on, and then hopefully we will hear what he has to say to us. Start button at the bottom.
I just need to tell you, the Global Methodist Church is not going to be United Methodism 2.0. In fact, listen carefully. If you think that this is just about changing the name on the front of your building and continuing to use your hymnals in the future, do not come with us. Do not. Because what we're trying to do is embed a distinctively Wesleyan DNA in this future movement. Around this church, we've been doing this for the last several years. We're putting in different pieces every year to try to get us ready for what's coming next. That said, here are my top 10 reasons why I recommend that you consider the Global Methodist Church. Number one, there's consistency in doctrine. What we believe matters, and our doctrinal belief and practices are rooted in historic Christianity, which will keep us connected with and in step with the global Big C Church. 95% of the Christians in the world believe what you do. You are not alone, even though we sometimes feel that way at annual conference. The second reason I would share is reclaiming accountable discipleship. We are deadly serious about embedding class meetings or band meetings in our local churches. This congregation is 190 years old. It was started about half a mile from here in a blacksmith shop along Blacklick Creek in Old Reynoldsburg as a class meeting for adults and a Sunday school to teach frontier kids how to read. All we're doing here is reclaiming our DNA. And that's really important for us because in the 1840s, when the Methodists were starting a church a day, they weren't starting churches like this or any of your churches. They were starting class meetings. Those were churches. They were micro communities. They were house churches. That's important for us to remember because one of the things that we're after here is the third reason is we're serious about church planting. There are going to be thousands of disaffected Methodists all over West Ohio, and they're going to need places to worship. One of the things we're thinking about here is how can 3 or 4 of our Wesley groups become house churches strategically located around Columbus to attract people to be a part of a Christian community of other Methodists. Our goal is to start 3,500 house churches in 7 years. We've done it before. We can do it again. The fourth reason I would tell you to join the Global Methodist Church is it's mission-driven rather than structurally bound. We presently have 13 general boards and agencies that are drowning in their own bureaucracy. During the last 5 years, 1,000 volunteers, none of them paid, have been working to put together recommendations on mission partnership, accountable discipleship, church multiplication, ministry with the student, ministry with the young, ministry with the marginalized, and a host of other initiatives without the encumberment of a bloated bureaucracy. It is amazing what the Spirit of God will do if we just get out of our systems and structures and allow him to work. The fifth reason I would recommend that you look at the Global Methodist Church is we are going to redefine and term limit episcopacy. We're going to start by eliminating the jurisdictional conference. It's interesting that a church that still wrestles with institutional racism continues to elect its episcopal leaders through the residue of institutional racism in the jurisdictions. There will be no lifetime episcopacy. And moving the bishops out, we're going to be moving the bishops out of institutional maintenance to reclaim the teaching office of the episcopacy so they are responsible for teaching and defending the faith. The sixth reason I would encourage you to do this is systemic accountability. I chaired the first team that was putting together the first draft of the Doctrine and Disciplines for the WCA actually, and we were trying to nail down everything we possibly could. I finally told them, I said, friends, we'll never be able to build a system that prevents bad actors or people that are ineffective. But we can build a system that makes it easy to remove them. An accountable system for bishops will not be controlled by bishops. What a novel idea. And clergy will not have a guaranteed appointment. You will need to bear fruit in your ministry. That's the way it was for Wesley. It ought to be that way for us. The laity are clapping on that one. The seventh reason is we're going to have a lean bureaucracy, lower costs, and there will be no trust clause. We want to be a movement of the compelled, not constrained. You need to want to be a part of what we're doing here. We want you to be compelled to join with us and be a part of this movement. It'll be intentionally lean. Annual conferences will be much smaller. The general conference meeting will only happen every 6 years. We'll set a cap on apportionments. It'll start at 5%. You're paying 15% or more now because there are some things we better share together. And there's a cap at 10 that the apportionments can only be raised by general conference action. Number 8, we'll have more congregational input on clergy selection. Gone will be the day when clergies and pastors are not consulted and engaged in clergy selection and assignment. In fact, the convening conference will be considering a modified call system to be implemented in the church. Number 9, there's an easier path to ordination. Can I get a witness from any local pastors in the room? Yeah. The present path can take up to 10 years. The proposed path allows ordination to happen much earlier. We believe that if you're ready to pastor a church, we ought to have some way to be ordaining you into that church. And number 10, it's going to be global from day one. This Friday, yesterday, all the United Methodist churches in Bulgaria and Romania announced that they're leaving to come to the Global Methodist Church. There are 5 annual conferences in Africa that have announced that they're leaving to affiliate with the Global Methodist Church. There are other groups of pastors and churches and other annual conferences that are announcing that they're leaving to join the Global Methodist Church. We're also being contacted by churches in Ecuador and in Venezuela and in Costa Rica and in the Caribbean, which the United Methodist Church has never been before, because they want to be a part of this kind of a movement. We'll have churches from the Philippines. We will be global from day one, and that'll include American churches. Central Texas Conference has figured out how to do this, and they have 125 churches that are leaving by May 1st to come and join the Global Methodist Church. Let me say it to you again, Global Methodist Church will not be United Methodist 2.0. I invite you to prayerfully consider joining a dynamic movement of like-minded, warm-hearted, spirit-filled, Jesus-loving, Bible-believing, Orthodox Wesleyan followers of Jesus who are connected together in a movement that's on mission.
My microphone's dying. When's the last time you were described that way? Bill, can you move that to the next slide? If you could. Just to recap, we won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but just some basics some basic reasons why we would want to align ourselves with this new denomination. First of all, there's no more inconsistency among different churches and annual conferences. As it is right now, you could worship in a single community in 3 different Methodist churches, and you'd have 3 different theologies. So in the new Global Methodist Church, it's not going to be that way. The pastors, those that are called to lead the churches, have to agree on Wesleyan principles and Wesleyan ideas that are scripturally bound. Next. This is something that we've tried to accomplish here at Mill Creek in the past, and we're going to have a renewed focus on that moving forward, that every person that is part of our fellowship, every person that's part of our church is going to be involved in some way. Whether that's for those that are homebound, that could be with a prayer ministry, but we can't just simply be observers. Then return to the practice of evangelism. If you've noticed, there's been an emphasis on that. That is basically making new disciples, more disciples for Christ. Accountability groups. We've got some here at Mill Creek. We've got Bible study on Wednesday. We've got our music team, our worship team. That may not seem like an accountability group, but it is. We hold each other accountable. We lift up folks in prayer. It's a small group. It's one of the ways that we begin to make changes in our church and in our community. And by the grace of God, if we continue to do what we're doing, we're going to see even more groups coming up in the future. I think of our free meal giveaway, our free lunch. I mean, that's an accountability group. The folks that take care of the one on the north side the same way, even though they're not technically connected right now to Mill Creek, but we still have an opportunity there. Outreach to the marginalized, and that's been a Wesleyan principle from way back, and that will continue. Again, free lunch, other possibilities that we can think about as we move forward. Connection with international churches. Would the church in Cuba would that qualify? I think it would. You get the idea. Involvement in planning new churches. Now, this would be in areas, especially if there's no Global Methodist Church presence, I'm not sure how that would apply to us here right now in the Mahoning Valley. I do know between those that have already committed and those that are in the process of committing, there should be at least a half a dozen churches in this area, in the immediate area. So, but at some point, it would be our hope that we could start some new faith communities, maybe in areas that are underserved by the Global Methodist Church. And number 8, the local churches are valued. And I don't want to be real critical of where we've been in the past, but it seems like we don't see or hear too much from the conference unless it's time for appointments or time to make a pastoral change. And those days are going to change. Structural realignment. You're still going to have annual conferences like we had in the United Methodist Church. The difference is there will be fewer of them, at least initially. But here's the reality. Even in the Methodist Church, there's going to be a restructuring with the number of churches that are leaving right now. For instance, it hasn't been announced definitively yet, but there seems to be this talk about East Ohio and West Ohio becoming one conference, which means one bishop. Anyway, with restructuring, it's going to be a leaner, more effective way of taking care of the administrative tasks of the church. And we still have an annual conference. You still have a general conference. The general conference, though, will only meet every 6 years instead of every 4, after the convening conference takes place. Right now in the United Methodist Church, I think it's a $22 or $24 million budget. We have all these boards and societies that not quite sure what all they do, but the reality is in the new Global Methodist Church, there is not a bunch of individual global boards and societies. There is one administrative board that takes care of all of the tasks that are required of the church. As Reverend Greenway alluded to, there's going to be some big changes coming in the episcopacy. That's a fancy word for bishops, but they will no longer have a lifetime appointment. It'll be a 10-year stint. Not only that, the oversight of the bishops won't be by another group of bishops. It'll be by the general body of the church. Right now, we have a judicial council basically that oversees the bishops, and you have bishops overseeing other bishops, and it's just not working. It just isn't working. But anyway, that's going to change. There still will be what was known as a district superintendent will now be known as a presiding elder, which goes back in Methodist polity. But what will happen here is one of the pastors of a local church will also serve as a presiding elder, kind of as a district superintendent. So that eliminates one more layer of bureaucracy and one additional parsonage that you don't have to pay for. Apportionments, and we'll talk a bit more about this coming up, but they're going to be, from all indications, about 40 to 50% less than what we're paying now. And I'll have some specific figures for you here in a little bit. There is a conference health care plan that's being offered, just very similar to that of the United Methodist Church, in similar cost and similar structure. The difference is, in the Global Methodist Church, there is a provision there or a clause there that states if the pastor's spouse has health care coverage through his or her employer, the pastor can go on that plan instead of being forced to go on to the Methodist plan. So, for instance, in our setting, Tammy still works. I'm assuming she's probably going to work for another 10 years or so. But she still works, and the bank she works for, Premier Bank, has a very good health care plan that is similar in scope to that of the United Methodist Church. But instead of you folks having to pay $21,000 a year for my health care, you realize it's $21,000. And the bottom line is The last time I looked anyway, I think, and I don't think Tammy would mind me sharing this, but I think it's maybe around $5,000 or $6,000 a year that she pays. She would pay, I guess, for both of us if we went that direction. So we can have those kind of conversations. You know, it doesn't make sense for you folks to have to pay $21,000 when I have an opportunity to go a different direction. Okay? Now, whether we talk about, you know, you picking up a portion of that remains to be seen. I'm just saying, right off the bat, we're going to save a minimum, if you would agree to do that, even a minimum of about $14,000, $15,000. So, but anyway, that's another big difference between the two denominations. In the Global Methodist Church, there is still a retirement system for the pastors, but it's a 401k system rather than a pension. And I won't go into all the differences between the two, but the reality is this: even in the United Methodist Church, they're going to be, rumor has it, that they're going to be making that change as well. Of course, that doesn't affect pastors that have already retired, but for those that are in the system now, they realize it's unsustainable, the pension costs. So the reality is what's going to happen here for me, and me, for instance, if, you know, assuming that I would make the change to go to the Global Methodist Church, I would receive a payout from my previous pension, and it would be reinvested in a new 401k. So all of the benefits, my previous retirement benefits follow me, as well as other pastors as well. But it is a 401k rather than a pension system, which gives us a little bit more control. When I say us, the pastor gives us a little bit more control over where those monies are invested and things of that nature. And most of us already know about this, but this is huge. Right now, unfortunately, we may have the deed to our building, but we don't own it. We're paying to have the carpets clean, we're paying to have the boiler fixed, we're paying to put new windows in, we're paying to have new roof on, but it's not our building. It's owned, we own it, and we hold it in trust for the conference. We've already went down this path where we've disaffiliated. We unanimously voted to disaffiliate, agreeing to pay the conference about $55,000 to allow us to leave. But in exchange, we do get title to our building, plus all of our assets, our bank accounts. So that's just a huge financial reason that we may want to consider doing that. And as Reverend Greenway alluded to, when it's time for a pastoral change, the DS just won't come in and introduce you to your new pastor. There'll be some conversations that will take place by your leadership team or your administrative board that will be in consultation with those folks in the next level up in the Global Methodist Church, and there'll be some dialogue about who your next pastor will be. It's just a big change in the way that is done now. And not only that, there's no more guaranteed appointments for pastors. And what that means is right now, if you were an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, you are guaranteed by virtue of your ordination to have a church appointment someplace. They have to give it to you. Doesn't matter if, you know, you've been to 3 churches and, you know, all 3 have, you know, forced you out. So you can understand the difference there. And what that does, it makes pastors much more accountable to their congregations. And the reality is this: it's more streamlined and less overhead, less complex. And the hope would be that it would not grow into something that this monstrosity that is known as the United Methodist Church. And Reverend Greenway spoke to that initially. He said, this is not going to be a reincarnation of the United Methodist Church. And again, local level, everything made on the local level. Now, we've had, here in East Ohio anyway, we've had pretty good ability to do that. We've had some DSs that are pretty easy to get along with, but there's other conferences that are not in that position. So anyway. So those are some of the things between what we saw in the video and through some of those slides. You get a feel for why I'm presenting this information to you. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to look through the handouts, and we won't spend all kind of time today going through that. But I'm hoping by now that you've had an opportunity to at least look through and see some of the major differences between the two. The reality is this, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. If we do choose to join the new Global Methodist Church, we will become more Methodist than we've ever been. We'll be reclaiming, as he put it, as Reverend Greenway put it, reclaiming our DNA. So, with all that being said, are there any questions whatsoever in the handout, or what you may have heard or seen from me or from the gentleman in the video? Let me do this, Kevin. I want the folks at home, or folks that might be watching this later, to hear the question. So the only way to do that is to use the microphone.
Who chooses the bishops and how are they chosen? And who chooses the elders and how are they chosen?
All right, the question was, who chooses the bishops and who chooses the elders? That question is found, I believe that question is answered. I don't want to say something that is not okay, let's start with the easy one. The easier one. Who chooses the elders? An elder is simply a pastor that has been ordained into the church. Okay? Right now, I am not an elder. I'm known in the United Methodist Church as a licensed local pastor. An elder is someone that has gone through 5 years of college plus seminary, obtained a seminary degree, and then gone through some additional steps through a local board or board of ministry that acknowledges their gifts and graces and then recommends them for ordination, and then by vote of the general conference or the annual conference, they're ordained. After they're approved by the annual conference, they're ordained. In the new Global Methodist Church, here's what's going to happen. The local pastors like myself, if I have completed my course of study, which I have, I've taken 60 hours of theological training at the Methodist Theological Seminary. So if you've completed your 60 hours of theological training and you pass a background check and you sign a statement agreeing to uphold the biblical principles and social principles that are outlined in the Book of Discipline for the Global Methodist Church, you will be brought aboard as an elder. In other words, you would transfer over from the United Methodist Church as an elder. New folks coming in would have the very same opportunities that I did. I came in as a local pastor. So what happens there is you take your course of study training. You also have to go before a local board of ministry, which is made up of laity and clergy. So it'll be the same way in the Global Methodist Church. I can't tell you right off the top of my head how that board of ministry is formed, but it's the same basic procedure. Once you meet with the board of ministry, you meet with a mentor for a year, then you're able to take the next step and be ordained to be recognized as a deacon, which is someone that hasn't completed all of their theological training yet, but they're still serving in a local church. So once their theological training is complete, then they would be ordained as an elder. In the United Methodist Church, a deacon serves a different role. They're not ordained, but yet they serve much like a pastor, but it's more meeting, it's more in the idea of meeting social needs in the community. So I would say this, Kevin. I know there's another document that is not in your packet, but it's on the website, and it's the provisional book of discipline for the new Global Methodist Church. And there's one whole chapter there that deals with the very question that you asked. And I don't want to say something that's not right. So what I would do is defer that question right now and say that there is a procedure for doing that's found in that new book of discipline, similar to the way that they're currently chosen in the United Methodist Church. But the difference is there's some accountability there involved. Okay, so no, there's no. It's one of those things where I have to remind myself that I'm not a politician, but sometimes politicians have to kind of sidestep questions they don't know the answer to. So, but that's a good question. The answer is found, though. Honestly, it's found on the website in that transitional book of discipline that is part of the Global Methodist Church. Okay.
Okay, so you're considered a local pastor
In the
now,
United Methodist Church, yes.
and there are no local pastors in the GMC. Are you going to be considered then a lead pastor or what?
Lead pastor is that's just kind of a descriptive term that many churches use. They have a lead pastor, they have a teaching pastor, they have a youth pastor, they have a pastor of ministry, a pastor of music. The only distinctions that will be made, the way I understand it right now anyway, in the Global Methodist Church, is you either be a deacon or an elder. A deacon is someone that's on their way to becoming an elder. They haven't completed their studies yet. So whether the local church identifies that person as a lead pastor, associate pastor, worship leader, those are decisions, those are labels that are affixed by the local church. The Global Methodist Church recognizes basically two tiers of clergy. Deacon, someone on their way to becoming an elder, and an elder.
So you're going to be an elder.
I would become, assuming that they received all of my transcripts, my theological statement. I have to go through a background check, much like I did with the United Methodist Church. But yes, I would be received into the Global Methodist Church as an elder.
Thank you.
Because I've completed my studies. Okay. Anyone else? Question?
In terms,
It's on.
in terms of salary.
No, it's not.
In terms of salary, is this going to be for pastors like a minimum salary with that type of thing?
There is. It's very similar to the same structure in the United Methodist Church, and that salary structure is spelled out in the transitional book of discipline, which you can find online.
Oh, good.
One of the questions that was back here is when it comes to the boards and agencies, what is the single connectional operations officer?
There is one. I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, it says a new leaner structure with a single connectional operations officer overall.
Let me look at that question. Is that in the chart or the second page?
Yeah, two Methodisms. It's under boards and agencies, Greg, on the left side. It's in the chart, a comparison chart.
Oh, I see it. Okay. Let me see if I can answer that question for you.
Yeah, it is first page.
I have another page here that has some verbiage from the transitional book of discipline, but it's so small, I didn't print it out for you folks because I knew I had a hard time reading it, and I didn't want to print it because it is on the website though. If you go to our website, you will see this document there, and you can blow it up so you can look at it much bigger. But let me see how that question is answered. I'm tempted to say that's a bishop, but I could be wrong. I don't want to say something that isn't correct.
Okay, that's all right. My second question, Greg, personal probably, but the district superintendents are going to be called presiding elders. Do you know, are these persons going to be serving full-time in that office, or are they also going to be serving a church?
They will be serving a church as well as, so yeah, some folks might be wondering, well, how in the world are they going to serve a local church and then act as a DS as well? Well, one of the differences is there's not going to be as many churches that they're going to be responsible for. Like right now in the United, Wanda being a former DS, right now, DSs have, in some cases, 70 churches they're responsible for. In the new Global Methodist Church, at least right now in the initial startup phase, the reality is there's just not going to be that number of churches that are going to need to fall under that DS. There's just until the denomination gets established and the churches begin to grow, then there'll be additional DSs, but it's not like you're going to have to serve a church and then serve 70 churches as a DS. The structure will be different. I mean, you may be responsible for 10 churches instead of 70. That answers the question, hopefully. I'm still dealing with that first question here, and I don't really have an answer. All right. I'm confident that question would be answered in that transitional book of discipline, which is 80 pages or 100 pages long. Now, that being said, the current United Methodist book of discipline is about 800 pages. So we talk about being streamlined, but that structure, I think that structure is spelled out in there. And again, you're going to have, bishop, presiding elder, and then clerk, deacons and elders. But there's also going to be, just like we have now, on the district level, you're going to have some sort of a district leadership team, just like there is now in the United Methodist Church. That district leadership team would be basically overseen or chaired by the presiding elder. Then those presiding elders would serve, then the next level up, and then they would come under the oversight of the bishops. So I guess the question, to answer the question, I'm surmising that the individual bishops and the individual conferences would be responsible for some of these tasks that are now taken care of by the boards and agencies of the United Methodist Church. So the folks in East Ohio, or it wouldn't even be East Ohio, the folks in the Ohio and Western Pennsylvania conference of the Global Methodist Church would be overseeing some of the missional activities that take place and some of the other things that are done, as far as social structures go. Other questions? I'm sorry, go ahead. Where'd that microphone go? There it is.
I think you might have already answered this question, but bishops, who holds them accountable?
The district superintendents, or the presiding elders.
There will be.
There's no more jurisdictional conference. Yes, if that's your question, yeah. Let me just talk just a moment about apportionments. Last year here at Mill Creek, our apportionments were just under $25,000. And that would include the money that we send to East Ohio Conference and to the local district conference. And in the new Global Methodist Church, you would still have an annual conference and a district conference, but the difference would be the costs involved. Last year, we paid $25,336. And the way that number is calculated, it's based upon your expenses. So the more staff you have, the more things you buy, the higher your electric bill, the higher your water bill, those kind of things, the more it costs you for insurance every year. They take your total cost, and there's a multiplier that's involved, and that's how that number is arrived at. In the new Global Methodist Church, it's not based upon your expenses. It's a number it's a percentage of your income. Now, this number here, this 1.5% tithe, this document is not unique to us here at Mill Creek. It came from someone in the West Texas Conference. But as Reverend Greenway alluded to, it's a 10% tithe of your expenses. And if memory serves me correctly, I think our expenses last year were maybe $120,000 maybe. Is that right, Hope? Somewhere around in that area. So you can say right off the bat, we're going to have a $12,000 apportionment plus probably a couple thousand to the district. So our apportionments are going to be significantly less than what they are now. And then they can't just raise it every year like they do now. The only way to raise apportionments is at general conference, which only takes place every 6 years. So anyway, I think that's a significant thing to consider. And the reason why the apportionments are less is there's less administrative costs involved. Any other questions? In about 2 minutes. Well, let me ask you this. Is there can anyone share any good reasons why we wouldn't want to join or align ourselves with the Global Methodist Church? We have a couple of choices. Let me just talk about that for a moment. A, we could say, all right, we're going to align ourselves with the new Global Methodist Church for some of the reasons that we've already heard. We could do that. We could say, all right, we're just going to go independent, and we're going to call ourselves the Mill Creek Community Church, and we're not aligned with any denomination whatsoever. The problem with that is there's many that goes along with it, but probably the greatest thing to remember is when you do that, you're out there all by yourself as far as, training, trying to find a trained pastoral replacement for someone that when you need to do that. There's legal things that go along with that are provided by a denomination that we would have to consider, especially with liability and things of that nature. If you're truly independent, it's a how can I put this? it can be a challenge administratively to take care of some of the things that we would need to take care of, that we rely upon the larger body of folks to help us with. It's just, and I've talked to some folks that are independent. They said, man, if we could align ourselves with a denomination, if we had the choice to do over, we would have. So another choice would be to align ourselves with another denomination, like the Free Methodist Church, or one of those other Wesleyan aligned denominations. The problem that I see, not the problem, but the issue I see with that is, right now, the new Global Methodist Church, with the number of churches that have already come aboard, they are already larger than any of those other Wesleyan denominations. My suspicion doesn't sound like a right word, but it is. My suspicion here is, in the coming years, you're going to see some of those denominations come into the Global Methodist Church. It's the world we live in. It's like all denominations are struggling, much like we are. So my point is, why not go with the largest one right now? Because they're probably going to be gobbling up the other ones anyway. Sounds kind of a stark way of putting it, but it's the truth. Is there anyone that would say, I have some concerns or reservations about the new Global Methodist Church? Is there any of those? Something that just doesn't sound right?
Anytime you hear global in the world, I think of, global monetary thing, global bank and all this stuff, and you get that in your mind and you're thinking, you get this picture, they're going to do things the same way they do this, what you've said, no, that's not the way, but it's still, what does it say? Subject to, what's the word? Temptation to be drawn into the way the world does things. So I just pray that something of a larger thing, that they, through prayer, seek God's help to organize this, because I'm sure, God can see the whole picture better than we can, and that they continue to seek God to find a sensible way to make this work.
Norman, I can empathize with that, because this whole new world order thing, and we haven't really talked. I haven't talked about it too much from the pulpit, but yeah, when you look at the global economy, there's talk about now a universal monetary fund, that the dollar will become go by the wayside. I understand those kind of things, but the reality is, we are now we are part of a global economy, and because of modern technology and transportation and communication, those changes, we are so easily connected now with those folks that are literally 5,000 miles away from us, who have the same needs for a relationship with Christ that we do. So the church has always been global. I shouldn't say always, but it's never been, just the idea that you're your own island in your own little community. That's not the way God designed the church to be. It was meant to be beyond the four walls of the building. So, yes, with those concerns in mind, we don't want to, one of the problems you run into, I'll point back to the United Methodist Church. You get so big that your administrative structure and all the boards and societies and all the rest kind of take over the day-to-day functions of the church, and we lose sight of the mission, which is, that's part of the reason they said the bishops now are going to go back to educational opportunities rather than, simply being administrators of the church. But thanks for sharing that, though. I understand that concern. And folks, it's hard to take a, to take a vote, because I know everyone, it's hard to get everybody together at once. But the reality is this: the leadership team has been talking about this and discerning this topic now for several months, probably longer than that. And at our last leadership meeting, we unanimously agreed among the leadership team that we should take the step to join the Global Methodist Church. What that means is we're asking you now, as the congregation, to come alongside of us and affirm that decision that was made. We respect the fact, that everyone has opinions and ideas and different ways of looking at things, but the reality is we have a leadership team here that is open to anyone in our church family. Those meetings are open. We meet the second Tuesday of the month at 5:30 or 6 o'clock here in the parlor. And you've already basically over the last 4 years or 3.5 years that we've become Mill Creek, that leadership team you've entrusted to make decisions for the church as a whole, as far as our investments go, as far as the ministry direction goes, and some of the things that we're doing here locally as a church. So I guess where I'm going with this is, you've already entrusted the leadership team to do the necessary things to allow Mill Creek to move ahead in their ministry. And I'm simply asking that you would affirm by your presence here today and by your vote that we would take the next step and join the Global Methodist Church. So I don't know quite how to do that, other than say, if you'd like to, if you think that is, if you'd like to affirm us going that direction, I just ask you to raise your hand or say aye. And if there's others that are opposed, same sign. Good. Good. So it looks like we've taken another step. This is a process. So here's where we're at. We'll take care of the paperwork that's involved and try to get that taken care of here in the next few weeks. And then none of this becomes official until church conference or annual conference, which will be in June. So it has to be voted on. The churches that are choosing to leave, like we have to be approved by the whole body there at annual conference, which will meet in Akron. But we're hoping that process goes as planned and there's no objections or any of that silliness that might be going on in some other annual conferences. Any more questions before we go have pizza? No? Can I pray? God, we know that these decisions we make are not just the decisions that affect us here in this congregation, but affects others in our community and beyond. It'll also affect folks that may be part of our church years down the road. So we're thankful, so thankful, Lord, for your leading us, for your guiding us. We're thankful for all the things that you've blessed us with already, beginning with your grace and your mercy, and then, Lord, with just the physical things that you have given us that allow us to do ministry here at Mill Creek. I'm thankful for each person that has taken time out of their busy Lord's Day to do this important part of the church. We're thankful, Lord, that you have allowed those in leadership here at Mill Creek to have the gifts and skills we need to allow us to continue to function as a church. We pray a continued blessing upon them, upon the congregation, upon those that will become part of our fellowship in the months and years to come. We pray for your leading us, for your guiding us, for a clear understanding of your will. And God, we also ask that you would bless the food that we're about to share to our bodies. Be our hope and our prayer that that food would help us to be nourished and strengthened so that we might become even better servants for you. So I ask for each one of these things now in the name of your Son, Jesus, our Christ. Amen. Sure.
You know, when a pastor comes to a church, you have no idea what's ahead of you. But I don't think that Greg really knew when he came here that he would be leading us through a merger. And that was a long process and a successful process. And he's given us really good leadership, stability through that. And now on top of that, going through this transition, and it takes a lot out of a pastor and a leader. So, Greg, we want to thank you for your leadership, your faithfulness, and for your heart.
And you know, there's no way I could do it by myself. As much as you think, as much as I would like to think I can, you know me, right? But no, thank you. That means a lot. It means a lot. But yeah, folks, keep up the good work, all of you. Keep up the good work. And if I ever get to the point where my head gets too big for me, let me know, all right? All right, praise God. Let's go eat pizza.